Hello from the Homeschool Mama Support Group on Facebook. I have a special welcome to a new member here. That is Angela. Welcome to the group. Angela, I see that you are a previous homeschool mama and you're saying you're loving your homeschool, just looking for a few connections to make. And though I don't have a homeschool group that's specific to kids, I do have a homeschool mom support group, which I call the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective. So if you're curious about that, let me know and I'd be glad to connect with you. The first 7 days are free, so you can just come check it out and see what it's like. We have a book discussion, we have a writer's room, there's a roundtable support group, and of course we have workshops that are customized just to you. And I'm about to release what those workshops are. One of them in the next few months is going to be about eyeball to eyeball 101 with your kids, how to build connection with your kids. I speak a lot about engaging in eyeball to eyeball time, that connection time, because when we build connections with our kids, a lot of the things, the struggles that we have with our kids diminish because they're feeling connected to us. So you're definitely welcome to join me for that workshop. And I also, in my podcast episode this week, I had a conversation in my closet with a special guest, my very favorite Canadian, my husband, who also happens to share my closet. So this podcast episode on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast is designed for homeschool moms' wellness. So I call it Homeschool Mama Self-Care because I wrote a book called Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer back in, I guess 2017, maybe 2018. And then I had it published on 2020. It was officially published April 2020. And I started a podcast just a month or two prior to that time. If I could turn back time, I actually would call it the Homeschool Mom Wellness and Mindset Podcast or something like that. Because I actually think that's more what I do. I'm serving homeschool moms in helping them shift their perspectives, decrease their limiting mindsets, and build wellness strategies and habits into their lives so that they show up on purpose and also build in a burnout prevention plan. Because when you do this long enough, burnout is a common experience. Doesn't matter how many kids you have, doesn't matter what methodology you choose. Eventually you just get real tired. You feel like you hit a wall. I had a conversation with a mom this morning who has been there. She's been hanging out with me for over a year and now has decided that she's had enough. She wants to do things differently in the upcoming year. So if that's you, then I'll be offering the Reimagine Your Homeschool coaching program within days. So if you haven't already heard about it, the Reimagine Your Homeschool coaching program is an 8-session coaching program where we discuss the very same things that I discuss in the mini course, the free mini course that I've offered just newly refreshed today. So if you're curious about this Reimagine coaching program, type Reimagine and I will make sure to get you the link so you can connect in with this course. Here are the 8-session titles. The first one is to clarify your why, because every year it changes. We got to know why we're doing what we're doing. I was just having a conversation with Leslie Martino. She is one of the speakers at Wild and Free and is also an author of the upcoming Slow Schooling. Is it Slow Schooling? I might have that wrong, but an amazing book, and it will definitely be in our book club. An amazing book, an amazing woman. It was a delight chatting with her. And her and I were talking about how when people ask us, how do you homeschool, or how did you homeschool, or what did you do? It's a hard question to answer, because for me, I've been homeschooling so long. I've got so many stories, so many seasons of homeschooling that changed over the years. The kids are different, but then they change too. And so you homeschool differently over the course of time. So why you homeschool this year might not be the reason why you homeschooled in the beginning. It might be a different reason on year 8 and year 12 and year 15. So that'll be our first session of this Reimagine Your Homeschool Group coaching program. The second one is to develop strategies for frustration and overwhelm. Let's just call it and say, this is what happens when any parent takes up this gigantic role of home education. they hit walls of frustration or overwhelm at times. It's normal. If this has been your experience, welcome to the crowd, because you are not alone. In fact, you are among the masses who experiences frustration or overwhelm at times. And that is totally cool. It's normal, but also none of us wants to stay there. And you want to turn that opportunity because it is an opportunity of hitting a wall into a growth opportunity where you can actually learn something from it, shift how you do things, shift how you show up so you're not continually frustrated or overwhelmed, because you don't have to be. Ask me how I know. The third session will be about embracing child-inspired learning. Child-inspired. It was Andrew Pudawa from Institute for Excellence in Writing that really helped me shift my language around this discussion. Not just child-led, but child-inspired. Because as a homeschool mom who appears to be an unschooling homeschool mom, I also wanted my kids to know certain things. So I would spend time engaging with my kids on things that mattered to me, that not only mattered to me, but I wanted them to know. But I also learned that kids, when given a prescription of education, don't engage with deep motivation and connection to whatever you're putting in front of them, especially if it's a long period of time. And so our goal is to lean in to child-inspired learning and use that as a strategy to address, moments of lack of motivation. And also because we want them to actually care about what they're learning. So we'll talk about embracing child-inspired learning. We're also going to, in the fourth session, discuss various perspective shifting opportunities, because I see that there are certain limiting mindsets that homeschool parents often experience. And it doesn't matter how you homeschool, how long you've homeschooled. It doesn't matter if you're the mom, the dad, or any other person in that child's life. The reality is, if you're a human, you will have limiting mindsets that are influencing your experience of homeschooling, your experience of your family life, and how you're showing up in your family life. Also, how you're showing up for yourself. So we're going to talk about perspective shifting opportunities in the fourth session. The fifth session, we're going to revamp your routines based on the real kids in your homeschool, and also based on your real capacity for creating routines, and also clarifying what matters and what doesn't. In the sixth session, we'll do a deep dive into self-growth practices, because after I am no longer part of your regular routine in this group coaching program, I want you to be able to take away self-awareness practices, self-coaching practices, so that you can continue that growth journey, so you can build healthier family dynamics and also enjoy what you're doing over the long term. In the seventh session, we're going to discuss practicing or incorporating various practices to handle your big emotions, or to engage them with compassion and kindness and grace, and actually come up with plans to address the real challenges you've had. It'll be a vulnerable opportunity, depending on how many people are joining us. If it's just 2, maybe it's 5, not more than 8 though. We'll have just a small group of women, and the opportunity is there to both build connection with other people, but being vulnerable, to being authentic in what our experiences are. The deeper, more authentic you can be in these conversations, the more likely you're to gain from these conversations. And we're going to be talking about strategies to manage things like anger and doubt and overwhelm and any other feelings that you're feeling on the regular. That actually was the discussion point that compelled me to write my book. And it was about overwhelm specifically. But I mean, all of these, every single thing I ever speak to, I've had experiences and have stories around myself. And I remember once upon a time being in a live workshop with Dr. Daniel Amen, and he was introducing us to the concept of questioning your thoughts. Is what you're thinking true? Are you 100% certain it's true? If there's an alternate perspective, what might it be? If you believe that alternate perspective, how might that actually influence the scenario in front of you? Those questions were powerful. and influenced how I began to see myself and relate to myself, and also know how to show up in my homeschool home. And the 8th session is about practicing accepting imperfection. Oftentimes I hear homeschool parents talk about not feeling good enough and not knowing if what they're doing is good enough. I think the conversation is rarely about, am I including enough stuff in it, or am I including the right stuff in it? It's more about, do I feel enough? And there is a challenge to accept imperfection. Working towards perfection it's an easy thing to do as a homeschool mom. We don't want to miss a beat. We want to feel like what we're doing matters. We definitely want to feel like we're doing right by our kids. And we definitely feel this compelling to respond to the public's view of what we're doing. And we want to live, we don't want to, but we do act defensively in response to their criticisms. And so we need to know here if what we're doing is good enough. I can tell you there is no such thing as perfect. You will homeschool perfectly imperfectly like the rest of us. And everyone in the school system also is receiving an imperfect education, as we know, those of us who have been educated in the school system. And what is perfect anyway? We'll have a conversation about that. As you get clear on that and you determine what it actually matters for you, then you will be more comfortable with that perfectly imperfect concept and feel more confident too. So if you're interested in the Reimagine Your Homeschool group coaching program, join me. Just mention below, just write Reimagine, or ask me for the free mini course if you'd first like to check that out and learn more about these 8 elements. Actually, you could just send me an email at my email, teresawiedrick@outlook.com, if you're curious about joining the group coaching program. That's TeresaWiedrick@outlook.com. Okay, so as I shared in the podcast this week, the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast, I am discussing homeschooling in Canada. I have a very interesting conversation with my husband, also in Studio C, 2 of us jammed into our walk-in closet, and discussing all things Canada, travel, the stereotypes of Canada, like the foods, and also the experience of living here, the variety of different things. But one of my very favorite discussion points with him was all about how his child-inspired learning has flourished into his adult-inspired living. And it really is fascinating. Of course, I know his story, but it's kind of big. And I think it'll be worth listening to, so you can feel reassured that however you are enabling your children in their education to lean into that child-inspired education, it will actually make you feel like, oh, look at this. A fully grown, okay, we'll just call it like it is. Both of us are middle-aged people that have determined that the best way to live is to lean in to child-inspired learning, because it will flourish into adult-inspired living. And as promised, one of the little vignettes that I didn't include in the podcast was about the books that we read while we were traveling around Canada, because we did a lot of travel in our homeschool years. We traveled into BC, well, obviously we're in BC, but we've traveled all over BC, all over Alberta. That's where we were both born, where we first met. And then we've done cross-Canada travels, when we were first moving to Kingston, Ontario, and then all the way through from Ontario all the way to Hay River, Northwest Territories. When we were moving back into the Alberta area, we did a lot of traveling in the East Coast. Between the 2 of us, I should say, him as a younger person and me with him, we went to Prince Edward Island, one of our very first trips. I had initially planned or hoped to live there as a homeschool parent. Beautiful place, highly recommended visiting. Halifax was one of the places we visited, so Nova Scotia and PEI. But then we've also done a summer trip into the Arctic. We drove a minivan, 3,600 kilometers to the Arctic Circle with 4 kids. And that was an adventure. One of the conversation points that, one of the books that I shared, or that I wanted to share, that we read when we went up to Dawson City, Northwest Territories, or was it Yukon? Gorgeous place. If your kids are curious about the gold rush and you want to see something that feels like right out of a movie set, but is in real life, they do a remarkable job of the gold rush. That's Dawson City in the Yukon. And we read a book, Dawson's Gold. Was it called Dawson's Gold? I'll put it in the comments below, or if you're curious, just ask me. And every time we moved somewhere or we traveled somewhere, we'd have a read aloud that would coincide with the place. And it was the most fun ever. It was an amazing way to reinforce learning as you were traveling. And in fact, the one that I have here is actually when we went into rural Africa, not when we were traveling across Canada. This one was called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind by William Kwamkwamba, and we read this remarkable story. I thought this was remarkable, not just because he discovered how to build a windmill, but also because it was a true story. And he was a young teen in a famine in Malawi, and his family didn't have enough food, and they had to figure out a way to create energy so that they could grow their garden and water it. And he figured out how to do that independently. So if you ever wonder if kids can be resourceful and build remarkable things or do remarkable things, well, I bet actually you have a few examples yourself, because in my experience, kids are pretty cool, pretty resourceful, and are capable of doing many amazing things. And we definitely see it in our homeschool families. And that is what this reminds me of. Someone that was inspired to do something interesting and was just getting curious, just trying to learn how to do a few things on his own. He figured it out, and he did something significant for his community. It actually became a Netflix movie, worth watching with the kids too. So that's what we did, is we always included a read aloud every time we moved from one location to the next. And homeschooling in Canada, if you are Canadian and you would like to hear some stories around homeschooling in Canada, or if you'd like to hear more about child-inspired learning, whether you're Canadian or not, then I invite you to listen to the recent release of the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast, which is titled, Can I Homeschool in Canada? And I hope you're having a beautiful week, beautiful summery day, wherever you are in Canada or around the world. I hope it's a lovely week.